Oh, hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. Chapter 39. Seedy Sam. I should say that for a cab horse, I was very well off indeed. My driver was my owner, and it was his interest to treat me well and not overwork me, even had he not been so good a man as he was. But there were a great many horses which belonged to the large cab owners, who let them out to their drivers for so much money a day. As the horses did not belong to these men, the only thing they thought of was how to get their money out of them. First, to pay the master, and then to provide for their own living. A dreadful time some of these horses had of it. Of course, I understood but little, but it was often talked over on the stand, and the governor, who was a kind-hearted man and fond of horses, would sometimes speak up if one came in very much jaded or ill-used. One day, a shabby, miserable-looking driver, who went by the name of Seedy Sam, brought in his horse looking dreadfully beat. And the governor said, "You and your horse look more fit for the police station than for this rank." The man flung his tattered rug over the horse, turned full round upon the governor, and said, in a voice that sounded almost desperate, "If the police have any business with the matter, it ought to be with the masters who charge us so much, or with the fares that are fixed so low. If a man has to pay 18 shillings a day for the use of a cab and 2 horses, as many of us have to do in the season, and must make that up before we earn a penny for ourselves, I say 'tis more than hard work, 9 shillings a day to get out of each horse before you begin to get your own living. Do you know that's true? And if the horses don't work, we must starve. And I and my children have known what that is before now. I've 6 of 'em, and only one earns anything. I am on the stand 14, 16 hours a day, and I haven't had a Sunday these 10 or 12 weeks. You know Skinner never gives a day if he can help it. And if I don't work hard, tell me who does. I want a warm coat and a mackintosh. But with so many to feed, how can a man get it? I had to pledge my clock a week ago to pay Skinner, and I shall never see it again." Some of the other drivers stood round nodding their heads and saying he was right. The man went on, "You that have your own horses in cabs or drive for good masters have a chance of getting on and a chance of doing right. I haven't. We can't change more than 6 pence. We can't charge more than 6 pence a mile after the first, within the 4-mile radius. This very morning I had to go a clear 6 miles and only took 3 shillings. I could not get a return fare and had to come all the way back. There's 12 miles for the horse and 3 shillings for me. After that, I had a 3-mile fare, and there were bags and boxes enough to have brought in a good many 2 pence if they had been put outside. But you know how people do. All that could be piled up inside the front seat were put in, and 3 heavy boxes went on the top. That was 6 pence, and the fare 1 and 6 pence. Then I got a return for 1 shilling. Now that makes 18 miles for the horse and 6 shillings for me. There's 3 shillings still for that horse to earn, and 9 shillings for the afternoon horse before I touch a penny. Of course, it is not always so bad as that, but you know it often is. And I say 'tis a mockery to tell a man that he must not overwork his horse, for when a beast is downright tired, there's nothing but the whip that will keep his legs a-going. You can't help yourself. You must put your wife and children before the horse. The masters must look to that. We can't. I don't ill-use my horse for the sake of it. None of you can say I do. There's wrong lays somewhere. Never a day's rest. Never a quiet hour with the wife and children. I often feel like an old man, though I'm only 45. You know how quick some of the gentry are to suspect us of cheating and overcharging. Why, they stand with their purses in their hands, counting it over to a penny, and looking at us as if we were pickpockets. I wish some of them had got to sit on my box 16 hours a day and get a living out of it, and 18 shillings besides, and that in all weathers. They would not be so uncommon particular never to give us a sixpence over, or to cram all the luggage inside. Of course, some of them tip us pretty handsome now and then, or else we could not live. But you can't depend upon that. The men who stood round much approved this speech, and one of them said, "It is desperate hard, and if a man sometimes does what is wrong, it is no wonder, and if he gets a dram too much, who's to blow him up?" Jerry had taken no part in this conversation, but I never saw his face look so sad before. The governor had stood with both his hands in his pockets. Now he took his handkerchief out of his hat and wiped his forehead. "You've beaten me, Sam," he said, "for it's all true, and I won't cast it up to you any more about the police. It was the look in that horse's eye that came over me. It is hard lines for man, and it's hard lines for beast, and who's to mend it, I don't know. But anyway, you might tell the poor beast that you were sorry to take it out of him in that way. Sometimes a kind word is all we can give him, poor brutes, and 'tis wonderful what they do understand." A few mornings after this talk, a new man came on the stand with Sam's cab. "Hello," said one. "What's up with Seedy Sam?" "He's ill in bed," said the man. "He was taken last night in the yard, and could scarcely crawl home. His wife sent a boy this morning to say his father was in a high fever and could not get out, so I'm here instead." The next morning, the same man came again. "How is Sam?" inquired the governor. "He's gone," said the man. "What? Gone? You don't mean to say he's dead?" "Just snuffed out," said the other. "He died at 4 o'clock this morning. All yesterday he was raving about Skinner and having no Sundays. 'I never had a Sunday's rest.' These were his last words." No one spoke for a while, and then the governor said, "I tell you what, mates, this is a warning for us." Chapter 40. Poor Ginger. One day, whilst our cab and many others were waiting outside one of the parks, where music was playing, a shabby old cab drove up beside ours. The horse was an old, worn-out chestnut, with an ill-kept coat and bones that showed plainly through it. The knees knuckled over, and the forelegs were very unsteady. I had been eating some hay. The wind rolled a little lock of it that way, and the poor creature put out her long thin neck and picked it up, and then turned round and looked about for more. There was a hopeless look in the dull eye that I could not help noticing. And then, as I was thinking where I had seen that horse before, she looked full at me and said, "Black Beauty, is that you?" It was Ginger, but how she changed! The beautifully arched and glossy neck was now straight, and lank and fallen in. The clean straight legs and delicate fetlocks were swelled. The joints were grown out of shape with hard work. The face, that was once so full of spirit and life, was now full of suffering, and I could tell by the heaving of her sides and a frequent cough how bad her breath was. Our drivers were standing together a little way off, so I sidled up to her a step or two that we might have a little quiet talk. It was a sad tale that she had to tell. After a 12 months run off at Earlshall, she was considered to be fit for work again, and was sold to a gentleman. For a little while she got on very well, but after a long gallop than usual, the old strain returned, and after being rested and doctored, she was again sold. In this way she changed hands several times, but always getting lower down. And so at last, she said, I was bought by a man who keeps a number of cabs and horses and lets them out. You look well off, and I'm glad of it, but I could not tell you what my life has been. When they found out my weakness, they said I was not worth what they gave for me, and that I must go into one of the low cabs and just be used up. That is what they are doing, whipping and working with never one thought of what I suffer. They paid for me and must get it out of me, they say. The man who hires me now pays a deal of money to the owner every day, and so he has to get it out of me too. And so it's all the week, round and round, with never a Sunday rest. I said, you used to stand up for yourself if you were ill-used. Ah, she said, I did once, but it's no use. Men are strongest, and if they are cruel and have no feeling, there is nothing that we can do but just bear it. Bear it on and on to the end. I wish the end was come. I wish I was dead. I have seen dead horses, and I am sure they do not suffer pain. I wish I may drop down dead at my work and not be sent off to the knackers. I was very much troubled, and I put my nose up to hers, but I could say nothing to comfort her. I think she was pleased to see me, for she said, You are the only friend I ever had. Just then her driver came up, and with a tug at her mouth, backed her out of the line and drove off, leaving me very sad indeed. A short time after this, a cart with a dead horse in it passed our cab stand. The head hung out of the cart tail, a lifeless tongue was slowly dropping with blood, and the sunken eyes. But I can't speak of them. The sight was too dreadful. It was a chestnut horse with a long, thin neck. I saw a white streak down the forehead. I believe it was Ginger. I hoped it was, for then her troubles would be over. Oh, if men were more merciful, they would shoot us before we came to such misery. Chapter 41. The Butcher. I saw a great deal of trouble amongst the horses in London, and much of it that might have been prevented by a little common sense. We horses do not mind hard work if we are treated reasonably, and I am sure there are many driven by quite poor men who have a happier life than I had, when I used to go in the Countess of W's carriage, with my silver-mounted harness and high feeding. It often went to my heart to see how the little ponies were used, straining along with heavy loads or staggering under heavy blows from some low, cruel boy. Once I saw a little grey pony with a thick mane and a pretty head, and so much like Merrylegs, that if I had not been in harness, I should have neighed to him. He was doing his best to pull a heavy cart, while a strong, rough boy was cutting him under the belly with his whip and chucking cruelly at his little mouth. Could it be Merrylegs? It was just like him, but then Mr. Bloomfield was never to sell him, and I think he would not do it, but this might have been quite as good a little fellow, and had as happy a place when he was young. I often noticed the great speed at which butchers' horses were made to go, though I did not know why it was so, till one day when we had to wait some time in St. John's Wood. There was a butcher's shop next door, and as we were standing, a butcher's cart came dashing up at a great pace. The horse was hot and much exhausted. He hung his head down while his heaving sides and trembling legs showed how hard he had been driven. The lad jumped out of the cart and was getting the basket, when the master came out of the shop much displeased. After looking at the horse, he turned angrily to the lad. "How many times shall I tell you not to drive in this way? You ruined the last horse and broke his wind, and you are going to ruin this in the same way. If you were not my own son, I would dismiss you on the spot. It is a disgrace to have a horse brought to the shop in a condition like that. You are liable to be taken up by the police for such driving, and if you are, you need not look to me for bail, for I have spoken to you till I'm tired, and you must look out for yourself." During this speech, the boy had stood by, sullen and dogged, but when his father ceased, he broke out angrily. It wasn't his fault, and he wouldn't take the blame. He was only going by orders all the time. "You always say, 'Now be quick, now look sharp,' and when I go to the houses, one wants a leg of mutton for an early dinner, and I must be back with it in a quarter of an hour. Another cook has forgotten to order the beef. I must go and fetch it and be back in no time, or the mistress will scold. And the housekeeper says they have company coming unexpected and must have some chops sent up directly. And the lady at number 4 in the Crescent never orders her dinner till the meat comes in for lunch. And it's nothing but hurry, hurry, all the time. If the gentry would think of what they want and order their meat the day before, there need not be this blow-up." "I wish to goodness they would," said the butcher. "'Twould save me a wonderful deal of harass, and I could suit my customers much better if I knew beforehand. But there, what's the use of talking? Whoever thinks of a butcher's convenience or a butcher's horse? Now then, take him in and look to him well. Mind he does not go out again today, and if anything else is wanted, you must carry it yourself in the basket." With that he went in, and the horse was led away. But all boys are not cruel. I have seen some as fond of their pony or donkey as if it had been a favourite dog, and the little creatures have worked away as cheerfully and willingly for their young drivers as I work for Jerry. It may be hard work sometimes, but a friend's hand and voice makes it easy. There was a young coaster boy who came up our street with greens and potatoes. He had an old pony, not very handsome, but the cheerfulest and pluckiest little thing I ever saw, and to see how fond these two were of each other was a treat. The pony followed his master like a dog, and when he got into his cart would trot off without a whip or a word, and rattle down the street as merrily as if he had come out of the Queen's stables. Jerry liked the boy and called him Prince Charlie, for he said he would make a king of drivers some day. There was an old man, too, who used to come up our street with a little coal cart. He wore a coal heaver's hat and looked rough and black. He and his old horse used to plod together along the street like two good partners who understood each other. The horse would stop of his own accord at the doors where they took coal off him. He used to keep one ear bent towards his master. The old man's cry could be heard up the street long before he came near. I never knew what he said, but the children called him Old Bar-Ho, for it sounded like that. Polly took her coal off him and was very friendly, and Jerry said it was a comfort to think how happy an old horse might be in a poor place. Chapter 42. The Election. As we came into the yard one afternoon, Polly came out. "Jerry, I've had Mr. B here asking about your vote, and he wants to hire your cab for the election. He will call for an answer." "Well, Polly, you may say that my cab will be otherwise engaged. I should not like to have it pasted over with their great bills. I should not like to have it pasted over with their great bills. And as to make Jack and Captain race about to the public houses to bring up half-drunken voters, why, I think 'twould be an insult to the horses. No, I shan't do it. I suppose you'll vote for the gentleman? He said he was one of your politics. He said he was of your politics. So he is in some things, but I shall not vote for him, Polly. You know what his trade is. Yes. Well, a man who gets rich by that trade may be all very well in some ways, but he is blind as to what working men want. I could not, in my conscience, send him up to make the laws. I dare say they'll be angry. But every man must do what he thinks to be the best for his country. On the morning before the election, Jerry was putting me into the shafts, when Dolly came into the yard sobbing and crying, with a little blue frock and a white pinafore spattered all over with mud. Why, Dolly, what is the matter? Those naughty boys, she sobbed, have thrown the dirt all over me and called me a little ragga. They called her a little blue ragamuffin, father, said Harry, who ran in looking very angry. But I have given it to them, and they won't insult my sister again. I have given them a thrashing they will remember. A set of cowardly, rascally, orange blackguards. Jerry kissed the child and said, Run in to mother, my pet, and tell her I think you had better stay at home today and help her. Then, turning gravely to Harry, My boy, I hope you will always defend your sister and give anybody who insults her a good thrashing. That is as it should be. But mind, I won't have any election blackguarding on my premises. There are as many blue blackguards as there are orange, and as many white as there are purple, or any other colour. And I won't have any of my family mixed up in it. Even women and children are ready to quarrel for the sake of a colour, and not 1 in 10 of them knows what it is about. Why, father, I thought blue was for liberty. My boy, liberty does not come from colours. They only show party, and all the liberty you can get out of them is liberty to get drunk at other people's expense, liberty to ride to the poll in a dirty old cab, liberty to abuse anyone that does not wear your colour, and to shout yourself hoarse at what you only half understand. That's your liberty. Oh, father, you are laughing. No, Harry, I am serious, and I am ashamed to see how men go on that ought to know better. An election is a very serious thing, at least it ought to be, and every man ought to vote according to his conscience, and let his neighbour do the same. Chapter 43. A Friend in Need. At last came the election day. There was no lack of work for Jerry and me. First came a stout, puffy gentleman with a carpet bag. He wanted to go to the Bishopgate station. Then we were called by a party who wished to be taken to the Regent's Park. And next we were wanted in a side street where a timid, anxious old lady was waiting to be taken to the bank. There we had to stop to take her back again, and just as we had set her down, a red-faced gentleman with a handful of papers came running up out of breath, and before Jerry could get down, he had opened the door, popped himself in, and called out, "Bow Street Police Station, quick!" So off we went with him, and when after another turn or two we came back, there was no other cab on the stand. Jerry put on my nose bag, for as he said, "We must eat when we can on such days as these. So munch away, Jack, and make the best of your time, old boy." I had found I had a good feed of crushed oats, wetted up with a little bran. This would be a treat any day, but very refreshing then. Jerry was so thoughtful and kind. What horse would not do his best for such a master? Then he took out one of Polly's meat pies, and standing near me, he began to eat it. The streets were very full, and the cabs, with the candidates' colours on them, were dashing about through the crowds as if life and limb were of no consequence. We saw 2 people knocked down that day, and one was a woman. The horses were having a bad time of it, poor things, but the voters inside thought nothing of that. Maybe many of them were half drunk, hurrahing out of the cab windows if their own party member came. If their own party came by. It was the first election I'd seen, and I don't want to be in another, though I have heard things are better now. Jerry and I had not eaten many mouthfuls before a poor young woman carrying a heavy child came along the street. She was looking this way and that way and seemed quite bewildered. Presently, she made her way up to Jerry and asked if he could tell her the way to St. Thomas's Hospital. How far it was to get there. She had come from the country that morning, she said, in a market cart. She did not know about the election and was quite a stranger in London. She got an order for the hospital for her little boy. The child was crying with a feeble, pining cry. "Poor little fellow," she said. "He suffers a deal of pain. He is 4 years old and can't walk any more than a baby. But the doctor said if I could get him into the hospital, he might get well. Pray, sir, how far is it, and which way is it?" "Why, missus," said Jerry, "you can't get there walking through crowds like this. Why, it is 3 miles away, and that child is heavy." "Yes, bless him, he is, but I am strong, thank God, and if I knew the way, I think I should get on somehow. Please tell me the way." "You can't do it," said Jerry. "You might be knocked down and the child be run over. Now look here, just get into this cab and I'll drive you safe to the hospital. Don't you see the rain is coming on?" "No, sir, no, I can't do that, thank you. I have only just enough money to get back with. Please tell me the way." Look you here, missus," said Jerry. "I've got a wife and dear children at home, and I know a father's feelings. Now get you into that cab, and I'll take you there for nothing. I'd be ashamed of myself to let a woman and a sick child run a risk like that." "Heaven bless you," said the woman, and burst into tears. There, cheer up, my dear. I'll soon take you there. Come, let me put you inside." As Jerry went to open the door, 2 men with collars in their hats and buttonholes ran up, calling out, "Cab!" "Engaged!" cried Jerry, but one of the men, pushing past the woman, sprang into the cab, followed by the other. Jerry looked as stern as a policeman. "This cab is already engaged, gentlemen, by that lady." "Lady?" says one of them. "Oh, she can wait. Our business is very important. Besides, we were in first. It is our right, and we shall stay in." A droll smile came over Jerry's face as he shut the door upon them. "All right, gentlemen. Pray stay in as long as it suits you. I can wait whilst you rest yourselves." And turning his back on them, he walked up to the young woman who was standing near me. "They'll soon be gone," he said, laughing. "No, don't trouble yourself, my dear." And they soon were gone, for when they understood Jerry's dodge, they got out, calling him all sorts of bad names, and blustering about his number, and getting a summons. After this little stoppage, we were soon on our way to the hospital, going as much as possible through by streets. Jerry rung the great bell and helped the young woman out. "Thank you 1,000 times," she said. "I could never have got here alone." "You're kindly welcome, and I hope the dear child will soon be better." He watched her go in at the door, and gently he said to himself, "Inasmuch as ye have done it to one of the least of these." Then he patted my neck, which was always his way when anything pleased him. The rain was now coming down fast, and just as we were leaving the hospital, the door opened again, and a porter called out, "Cab!" We stopped, and a lady came down the steps. Jerry seemed to know her at once. She put back her veil and said, "Barker? Jeremiah Barker? Is it you? I am very glad to find you here. You are just the friend I want, for it is very difficult to get a cab in this part of London today." "I shall be proud to serve you, ma'am. I am right glad I happened to be here. Where may I take you to, ma'am? Where may I take you to, ma'am?" "To Paddington Station, and then if we are in good time, as I think we shall be, you shall tell me all about Mary and the children." We got to the station in good time, and being under shelter, the lady stood a good while talking to Jerry. I found she had been Polly's mistress, and after many inquiries about her, she said, "How do you find the cab work suits you in winter? How do you find the cab work suit you in winter? I know Mary was rather anxious about you last year." "Yes, ma'am, she was. I had a bad cough that followed me up quite into the warm weather, and when I am kept out late, she does worry herself a good deal. You see, ma'am, it is all hours and all weathers, and that does try a man's constitution. But I am getting on pretty well, and I should feel quite lost if I had not horses to look after. I was brought up to it, and I am afraid I should not do so well at anything else." "Well, Barker," she said, "it would be a great pity that you should seriously risk your health in this work, not only for your own, but for Mary and the children's sake. There are many places where good drivers or good grooms are wanted, and if ever you think you ought to give up this cab work, let me know." Then sending some kind messages to Mary, she put something into his hand, saying, "There is 5 shillings each for the 2 children. Mary will know how to spend it." Jerry thanked her and seemed much pleased, and turning out of the station, we at last reached home, and I, at least, was tired. Chapter 44. Old Captain and his successor. Captain and I were great friends. He was a noble old fellow, and he was very good company. I never thought that he would have to leave his home and go down the hill, but his turn came, and this was how it happened. I was not there, but I heard all about it. He and Jerry had taken a party to the great railway station over London Bridge, and were coming back, somewhere between the bridge and the monument, when Jerry saw a brewer's empty dray coming along, drawn by 2 powerful horses. The drayman was lashing his horses with his heavy whip. The dray was light, and they started off at a furious rate. The man had no control over them, and the street was full of traffic. One young girl was knocked down and run over, and the next moment they dashed up against our cab. Both the wheels were torn off, and the cab was thrown over. Captain was dragged down, the shafts splintered, and one of them ran into his side. Jerry too was thrown, but was only bruised. Nobody could tell how he escaped. He always said 'twas a miracle. When poor Captain was got up, he was found to be very much cut and knocked about. Jerry led him home gently, and a sad sight it was to see the blood soaking into his white coat and dropping from his side and shoulder. The drayman was proved to be very drunk and was fined, and the brewer had to pay damages to our master, but there was no one to pay damages to poor Captain. The farrier and Jerry did the best they could to ease his pain and make him comfortable. The fly had to be mended, and for several days I did not go out, and Jerry earned nothing. The first time we went to the stand after the accident, the governor came up to hear how Captain was. "He'll never get over it," said Jerry. "At least not for my work." So the farrier said this morning. He says he may do for carting and that sort of work. It has put me out very much. Carting indeed. I've seen what horses come to at that work round London. I only wish all the drunkards could be put in a lunatic asylum instead of being allowed to run foul of sober people. If they would break their own bones and smash their own carts and lame their own horses, that would be their own affair, and we might let alone some, and we might let them alone. But it seems to me that the innocent always suffer, and then they talk about compensation. You can't make compensation. There's all the trouble and vexation and loss of time, besides losing a good horse that's like an old friend. It's nonsense, talking of compensation. If there's one devil that I should like to see in the bottomless pit more than another, it's the drink devil." "I say, Jerry," said the governor, "you are treading pretty hard on my toes, you know. I'm not so good as you are. More shame for me. I wish I was." "Well," said Jerry, "why don't you cut with it, governor? You are too good a man to be the slave of such a thing." "I am a great fool, Jerry. But I tried once for 2 days, and I thought I should have died. How did you do?" "I had hard work at it for several weeks, you see. I never did get drunk, but I found that I was not my own master, and that when the craving came on, it was hard work to say no. I saw that one of us must knock under, the drink devil or Jerry Barker, and I said that it should not be Jerry Barker. God helping me, but it was a struggle, and I wanted all the help I could get, for till I tried to break the habit, I did not know how strong it was. But then Polly took such pains that I should have good food, and when the craving came on, I used to get a cup of coffee, or some peppermint, or read a bit in my book, and that was a help to me. Sometimes I had to say over and over to myself, 'Give up the drink, or lose your soul. Give up the drink, or break Polly's heart.' But thanks be to God and my dear wife, my chains were broken, and now for 10 years I have not tasted a drop, and never wish for it." "I've a great mind to try at it," said Grant, "for 'tis a poor thing not to be one's own master." "Do, governor, do. You'll never repent it. And what a help it would be to some of the poor fellows in our rank if they saw you do without it. I know there's 2 or 3 would like to keep out of that tavern if they could." At first, Captain seemed to do well, but he was a very old horse, and it was only his wonderful constitution and Jerry's care that had kept him up at the cab work so long. Now he broke down very much. The farrier said he might mend up enough to sell for a few pounds, but Jerry said no. A few pounds got by selling a good old servant into hard work and misery would canker all the rest of his money, and he thought the kindest thing he could do for the fine old fellow would be to put a sure bullet through his heart, and then he would never suffer more, for he did not know where to find a kind master for the rest of his days. The day after this was decided, Harry took me to the forge for some new shoes. When I returned, Captain was gone. I and the family all felt it very much. Jerry had now to look out for another horse, and he soon heard of one through an acquaintance who was under groom in a nobleman's stables. He was a valuable young horse, but he had run away, smashed into another carriage, flung his lordship out, and so cut and blemished himself that he was no longer fit for a gentleman's stables. And the coachman had orders to look round and sell him as well as he could. I can do with high spirits, said Jerry, if a horse is not vicious or hard-mouthed. There's not a bit of vice in him, said the man. His mouth is very tender, and I think myself that was the cause of the accident. You see, he had just been clipped, and the weather was bad, and he had not had exercise enough, and when he did go out, he was as full of spring as a balloon. Our governor, the coachman I mean, had him harnessed in as tight and strong as he could with the martingale and the bearing rein, a very sharp curb, and the reins put in at the bottom bar. It is my belief that it made the horse mad, being tender in the mouth and so full of spirit. Likely enough, I'll come and see him, said Jerry. The next day, Hotspur, that was his name, came home. He was a fine brown horse, without a white hair in him, as tall as Captain, with a very handsome head, and only 5 years old. I gave him a friendly greeting by way of good fellowship, but did not ask him any questions. The first night he was very restless. Instead of lying down, he kept jerking his halter rope up and down through the ring and knocking the block about against the manger till I could not sleep. However, the next day, after 5 or 6 hours in the cab, he came in quiet and sensible. Jerry patted and talked to him a good deal, and very soon they understood each other. And Jerry said that with an easy bit and plenty of work, he would be as gentle as a lamb, and that it was an ill wind that blew nobody good. For if his lordship had lost 100 guinea favourite, the cabman had gained a good horse with all his strength in him. Hotspur thought it a great come down to be a cab horse, and was disgusted at standing in the rank. But he confessed to me at the end of the week that an easy mouth and a free head made up for a great deal, and after all the work was not so degrading as having one's head and tail fastened to each other at the saddle. In fact, he settled in well, and Jerry liked him very much. Chapter 45. Jerry's New Year. Christmas and the New Year are very merry times for some people, but for cabmen and cabmen's horses it is no holiday, though it may be a harvest. There are so many parties, balls and places of amusement open that the work is hard and often late. Sometimes driver and horse have to wait for hours in the rain or frost, shivering with cold, whilst the merry people within are dancing away to the music. I wonder if the beautiful ladies ever think of the weary cabman waiting on his box, and his patient beast standing till his legs get stiff with cold. I had now most of the evening work, as I was well accustomed to standing, and Jerry was also more afraid of Hotspur taking cold. We had a great deal of late work in the Christmas week, and Jerry's cough was bad. But however late we were, Polly sat up for him and came out with a lantern to meet him, looking anxious and troubled. On the evening of the New Year, we had to take 2 gentlemen to a house in one of the West End squares. We set them down at 9 o'clock and were told to come again at 11. "But," said one of them, "as it is a card party, you may have to wait a few minutes, but don't be late." As the clock struck 11, we were at the door, for Jerry was always punctual. The clock chimed the quarters, 1, 2, 3, and then struck 12, but the door did not open. The wind had been very changeable, with squalls of rain during the day, but now it came on sharp, driving sleet, which seemed to come all the way round. It was very cold, and there was no shelter. Jerry got off his box and came and pulled one of my cloths a little more over my neck. Then he took a turn or two up and down, stamping his feet. Then he began to beat his arms, but that set him off coughing. So he opened the cab door and sat at the bottom with his feet on the pavement, and was a little sheltered. Still the clock chimed the quarters, and no one came. At 12:30, he rang at the bell and asked the servant if he would be wanted that night. "Oh, yes, you'll be wanted safe enough," said the man. "You must not go, it will soon be over." And again Jerry sat down, but his voice was so hoarse I could hardly hear him. At 1:15, the door opened, and the two gentlemen came out. They got into the cab without a word and told Jerry where to drive. That was nearly 2 miles. My legs were numb with cold, and I thought I should have stumbled. When the men got out, they never said they were sorry to have kept us waiting so long, but were angry at the charge. However, as Jerry never charged more than was his due, so he never took less, and they had to pay for the 2 hours and quarter waiting, but it was hard-earned money to Jerry. At last we got home. He could hardly speak, and his cough was dreadful. Polly asked no questions, but opened the door and held the lantern for him. "Can't I do something?" she said. "Yes, get Jack something warm, and then boil me some gruel." This was said in a hoarse whisper. He could hardly get his breath, but he gave me a rub down as usual, and even went up into the hayloft for an extra bundle of straw for my bed. Polly brought me a warm mash that made me comfortable, and then they locked the door. It was late the next morning before anyone came, and then it was only Harry. He cleaned us and fed us and swept out the stalls. Then he put the straw back again as if it was Sunday. He was very still and neither whistled nor sang. At noon he came again and gave us our food and water. This time Dolly came with him. She was crying, and I could gather from what they said that Jerry was dangerously ill, and the doctor said it was a bad case. So 2 days passed, and there was great trouble indoors. We only saw Harry and sometimes Dolly. I think she came for company, for Polly was always with Jerry, and he had to be kept very quiet. On the 3rd day, whilst Harry was in the stable, a tap came at the door, and Governor Grant came in. "I wouldn't go to the house, me boy," he said, "but I want to know how your father is." "He is very bad," said Harry. "He can't be much worse, and they call it bronchitis. The doctor thinks it will turn one way or another tonight." "That's bad, very bad," said Grant, shaking his head. "I know 2 men who died of that last week. It takes them off in no time. But whilst there's life, there's hope. So you must keep up your spirits." "Yes," said Harry quickly. "And the doctor said that father had a better chance than most men because he didn't drink. He said yesterday the fever was so high that if father had been a drinking man, it would have burnt him up like a piece of paper. But I believe he thinks he will get over it. Don't you think he will, Mr. Grant?" The governor looked puzzled. "If there's any rule that good men should get over these things, I'm sure he will, my boy. He's the best man I know. I'll look in early tomorrow." Early next morning he was there. "Well?" said he. "Father is better," said Harry. "Mother hopes he will get over it." "Thank God," said the governor. "And now you must keep him warm and keep his mind easy. And that brings me to the horses. You see, Jack will be all the better for the rest of a week or 2 in a warm stable, so you can easily take him a turn up and down the street to stretch his legs. But this young one, if he does not get work, he will soon be all up on end, as you may say, and will be rather too much for you. And when he does go out, there'll be an accident. There'll be an accident." "It is like that now," said Harry. "I have kept him short of corn, but he is so full of spirit, I don't know what to do with him." "Just so," said Grant. "Now look here. Will you tell your mother that Tell your mother that if she is agreeable, I will come for him every day till something is arranged, and take him for a good spell of work, and whatever he earns, I'll bring your mother half of it, and that will help with the horse's feed. Your father is in a good club, I know, but that won't keep the horses, and they'll be eating their heads off all this time. I'll come at noon and hear what she says." And without waiting for Harry's thanks, he was gone. At noon, I think he went and saw Polly, for he and Harry came into the stable together, harnessed Hotspur, and took him out. For a week or more he came for Hotspur, and when Harry thanked him or said anything about his kindness, he laughed it off, saying it was all good luck for him, for his horses were wanting a little rest, which they would not otherwise have had. Jerry grew better steadily, but the doctor said that he must never go back to the cab work again if he wished to be an old man. The children had many consultations together about what father and mother would do, and how they could help to earn money. One afternoon, Hotspur was brought in very wet and dirty. "The streets are nothing but slush," said the governor. "It will give you a good warming, my boy, to get him clean and dry." "All right, governor," said Harry. "I shall not leave him till he is. You know I have been trained by my father." "I wish all the boys had been trained like you," said the governor. While Harry was sponging off the mud from Hotspur's body and legs, Dolly came in, looking very full of something. "Who lives at Fairstowe, Harry? Mother has got a letter from Fairstowe." She seemed so glad, and ran upstairs to father with it. "Don't you know? Why, it is the name of Mrs. Fowler's place, mother's old mistress. You know that lady that father met last summer, who sent you and me 5 shillings each?" "Oh, Mrs. Fowler, of course I know all about her. I wonder what she is writing to mother about." "Mother wrote to her last week," said Harry. "You know she told father if ever he gave up the cabbing work, she would like to know. I wonder what she says. Run in and see, Dolly." Harry scrubbed away at Hotspur with a whoosh, with a whoosh, with a whoosh, whoosh, like any old ostler. In a few minutes, Dolly came dancing into the stable. "Oh, Harry, there never was anything so beautiful. Mrs. Fowler says we are all to go and live near her. There is a cottage, now empty, that will just suit us, with a garden and a hen house and apple trees and everything, and her coachman is going away in the spring. And then she will want father in his place, and there are good families round where you can get a place in the garden or the stable or as a page boy. And there's a good school for me, and mother is laughing and crying by turns, and father does look so happy." "That's uncommon jolly," said Harry, "and just the right thing, I should say. It will suit father and mother both. But I don't intend to be a page boy with tight clothes and rows of buttons. I'll be a groom or a gardener." It was quickly settled that as soon as Jerry was well enough, they should remove to the country, and that the cab and horses should be sold as soon as possible. This was heavy news for me, for I was not young now, and could not look for any improvement in my condition. Since I left Birtwick, I had never been so happy as with my dear master Jerry. But 3 years of cab work, even under the best conditions, will tell on one's strength, and I feel that I was not the horse that I had been. Grant said at once that he would take Hotspur, and there were men on the stand who would have bought me, but Jerry said I should not go to cab work again with just anybody, and the governor promised to find a place for me where I should be comfortable. The day came for going away. Jerry had not been allowed to go out yet, and I never saw him after that New Year's Eve. Polly and the children came to bid me goodbye. "Poor old Jack, dear old Jack, I wish we could take you with us," she said, and then laying her hand on my mane, she put her face close to my neck and kissed me. Dolly was crying and kissed me too. Harry stroked me a great deal, but said nothing. Only he seemed very sad, and so I was led away to my new place.